I'm a former monastic who lived in various monasteries for 6 years, mainly in the Buddhist tradition. I also went to seminary to be a priest and lived in many closed religious communities. And I want to talk a little bit about the signs that are very unique to religious trauma. So, if somebody believes that they have religious trauma, um, you're going to notice certain experiences in yourself. One is that you're constantly trying to find a rational reason to what you feel. And you can feel hypervigilant all the time. You feel very anxious all the time. And you feel very confused inside because you feel a lot of feelings, but your feelings at the same time feel unacceptable. So there's a lot of confusion around authenticity, who I am really, and is it okay to feel what I feel? So people with religious trauma struggle with a lot of doubt and uncertainty. So in the beginning, this is extremely difficult and is what I would say one of the primary motivating factors to getting some help. The second thing we can notice is we just feel very socially awkward. Sometimes people feel very resentful that they've been they've grown up in a religious culture. They feel like they're behind everybody else, that they don't really understand culture or can easily integrate into culture. Another thing that can happen and that is quite common is this experience we call in Western psychology depersonalization. So in depersonalization, there's this minimization of the self, but that's how that's usually experienced is a person will feel sort of unreal or like more than just an outsider. They'll feel kind of like what other people are experiencing or what they're experiencing is unreal in some way. That they're observing themselves, but not in a positive way. So I see my emotions, but it's scary to own them. I feel kind of checked out. So there's the feelings are untrustworthy and they may be connected to sin. So this brings us to something else, which is there's a feeling that people can experience of imposter syndrome. So I want to be real and I want to be authentic, but I'm not sure if I'm really coming across as authentic because I grew up in a way where witnessing was so important. So it's not important that you are happy. What's important is that you look happy because Christ is coming back and you've got to be somebody that represents well. So you need to witness. You need to be careful how you present yourself, how you present your emotional states. So this can create a feeling inside, kind of a cognitive dissonance or a feeling inside like you're inauthentic deep down. So and this is a large reason of why cognitive behavioral therapies really do not work and are ineffective for religious trauma. Because up here, I can feel like I really know what's going on. I can communicate well. I can speak well. Maybe even I was a minister. But down here, I don't trust this at all. I don't trust the body. I don't trust my emotions. I don't trust what's going on down here. I've been taught to distrust that. The next sign you may have religious trauma is that you feel a real struggle with perfectionism. And this may manifest either in your external environment or your relationships with others. Other people may see us as being very, very hypercritical people, very fastidious people, and we may be very hypercritical with ourselves. So the way we observe ourselves is really not just critical, but very, very shaming. And we're we may have a lot of self-hatred inside, and that really affects the way we're able to see ourselves in life. The next thing is that there's a belief that trusting in one's feelings as information is going to lead to emotional flooding or the inability to control one's emotions or one's actions. It's important to realize that religious trauma is a form of attachment trauma, right? So, attachment trauma means that at a young age, we have a really difficult time. We grew up with a really difficult time in understanding um, what love is, right? We had a difficult time connecting with the people that raised us, our parents, our guides, our family, our grandparents, our teachers. And when we have a difficult time connecting and feeling loved and accepted by others, this can really affect our own self-image and the way we experience our own emotions. So these are some of the signs unique to religious trauma. I'm going to do one more, okay?
Okay, I'll keep it on.
Hi, my name is Robert Espiau. So I am a former uh, monk, monastic in Eastern traditions for 6 years. And I also went to seminary to be a priest. I've lived in a lot of closed religious communities and monasteries. And I want to talk a little bit today about recovery from religious trauma, because this has certain phases. So the first stage that usually happens to people when they recover from religious trauma is that they go through a stage of disillusionment. And that is hard. A person becomes very disillusioned with the religion and or their teacher, and they really struggle to stay connected to their community, to their teacher, to their religion for a while. But they see there's something really wrong there, something really wrong for them. It's usually something emotional, and they want to disconnect or leave. And sometimes they'll reach out for help, but it's often very difficult for them to reach out for help. In our experience, we work with a lot of religions all around the world and different people from different countries, because they feel that mental health therapists and counselors, because they're atheistic in their approach, because they're new agey in their approach, they really distrust a lot of us. If they see the word spirituality, they often really distrust that. If they see culty programming, they feel you wanting to take away something from them. So they're very, very careful in how they reach out. And I think if we help people with religious trauma, we have to be very careful and respectful how we approach them. The second stage is high anxiety, dissociation. So they can be someone with religious trauma. When we start to leave, we feel highly, highly anxious. And it can be so much anxiety that we start dissociating from our body or our emotions. This is the most dangerous and consuming phase, because religion brings a lot of certainty to a person, a lot of certainty. There's a certain book that I read. That book tells me how to live, how to eat, how to act, how to behave, how to cut my hair, how to dress, how to be in the community. And now I'm not so sure that book is true anymore. So if you take that book away from me, if you take that those beliefs away from me, then suddenly I'm left in this big vacuum of uncertainty. And this is what's so dangerous, for example, about the old style deconstructionist approach, or the old cult deprogramming style, is that you can logically take away somebody's belief system through logic and deconstructionism. And that is a very dangerous approach to do that. Because if you're doing that, you don't really understand defense mechanisms, PTSD, depersonalization, dissociation, trauma. Because trauma and dissociation, depersonalization happens down here in the body. It isn't something happening up here. Okay. So if we do the deconstructionist approach, you may take away their primary defense mechanism. And for example, somebody that may have grown up Christian and always used praying and forgiveness to Christ as their way of evacuating their anxiety and their shame. Now they don't believe in God. They don't believe in Christianity anymore. Great. They see reality the way you see it, but they're left with a building, rising anxiety and self-hatred that's increasing and increasing. And you know what? You've taken away their primary way of releasing that. There is no release valve for them anymore. They can't pray. So now they will feel a buildup of self-hatred and shame. This is the problem with the deconstructionist approach. It is not addressing trauma. So I don't really want to discourage anybody from going into that approach, because there's a much slower approach that's needed for working with religious trauma. And the main concern to work with religious trauma is emotional regulation. That is the most important thing we have to be concerned with at this phase. So at the second phase, there's a highly destabilizing feeling, and clients often react by moving to the other extreme. So instead of trying to be good, I'm now going to be the epitome of bad. I'm going to get into Satanism or sex or drugs or music, or people can get they can get suicidal. They can destroy their marriage. They can get very extreme at this time. And it's a very, very hard time for people. They can feel absolutely terrified. And this brings us to the next phase, anger or terror. This is usually when they find people who are selling the deconstructionist approach, and they tell them their anger is very valid, and it is. And they really reinforce to them that they should be angry about what's happened, and it's really unjust and unfair and wrong. And it is. And there can be a lot of wrong things that happen to them. There can be terrible sexual abuse. There can be terrible things that are hypocritical in the church they belong to. It can be terrible, terrible things. However, again, being deconstructionist is not going to address their trauma. And that's really what's needed. Okay. So the most important thing here is, again, working with depersonalization, working with attachment trauma, and understanding that all emotions are going to start to come online. So the person tries not to feel the devastating effect of their emotions. Emotions subconsciously don't feel positive, as they're still sort of equivalent to sin. So the client tries to dissociate from emotions. Maybe they start drinking more, maybe they start smoking weed more. They used to use their church or praying, and now they don't have that anymore. So there's a struggle with authenticity. There's a strong need to feel authenticity. We used to witness all the time, and now we realize that may not have been very authentic. People get really pissed off about losing their authenticity through years of needing to witness. They feel very angry. And they need to have a way of being able to be with and regulating those emotions, not just blaming. And that's another problem with the deconstructionist approaches. It really gets into blaming the family, blaming the church, blaming people. And you can do that. You can be angry and you can blame everybody, and that's okay. But that's not going to take you out of the religious trauma. And in some cases, it makes people develop more self-hatred and a more of a critical view of themselves and others. The next thing is the core issue. So there's a core issue, a core trauma inside that each person tends to have. Two or three events that happen in their life that really, really encapsulate that religious trauma for them. And around this is a lot of repressed emotions. So emotions may feel like sin depending on the person's religious background and their beliefs. Emotions can feel like they're wrong, which means I'm fundamentally wrong. So that person has to be able to work with a counselor who can help them through dissociative states or depersonalization in order to be able to see that core issue, to first develop a sense of safeness in their body and being able to be with their emotions in order to be able to see that core issue. And this could be a process that takes a while. So healing and recovery is the last phase, right? We want to go into. And for healing and recovery to happen, primarily the client has to learn some practices that involve the acceptance of both the light and the dark within themselves. They have to be able to learn some practices that help them to observe themselves in a new way, in a non-critical way, where they can begin to be with their emotions and accept their emotions. And they can begin to develop ways to bring some serenity into themselves and accept themselves for who they are. And this is the trickiest part. So these are some of the signs or stages that people go through when they try to step out of their religion or their religious beliefs. And these are often tied into a community, to their family. And that's also why it's very dangerous sometimes to do a deconstructionist approach, because if you've not grown up or lived in a closed religious community, you have no idea what that person is giving up by leaving their religion. They may be giving up their entire family, their entire sense of community, their entire friendships that have gone on for 30 years. It can be unbelievably destabilizing and even make a person suicidal. It can be unbelievably difficult and painful and really rock their whole world. So I think we need to be very careful, very slow, very gradual. When you're going to take somebody's sense of reality and take that away from them, you better have something that you can both replace that with, something that brings a sense of okayness, a sense of safeness, a sense of stability. So in the beginning, this is why it's so important to help the client to develop a sense of safeness in the body. And really the best thing for this, we believe, is somatic forms of psychology and somatic methods, not a deconstructionist approach. And what I'm saying is really supported by the research of some of the foremost trauma experts in the world, like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Dr. Babette Rothschild, Dr. Robert Scare, and many others. So this is something I think it's really important for people to look at when they're trying to step out of a religion and work on their own religious trauma recovery. So thank you for listening to me. And I really hope you find peace on your journey.